Welcome to the Narrator Roundtable. I'm André Santana, and joining me today we have Deanna.
What's up, what's up, what's up?
Hey, we've got Lindsey on the line.
Hello.
Hello, hello, and of course, Kirt.
Or do we? Because I might not have anything to add, but here I am.
And we want you here anyways, for the energy, for the vibes, for the drama.
Drama? Am I the drama? I don't think I'm the drama.
Kirt, you're the drama.
I recently had someone tell me that they thought I was good enough at the audiobook thing. And it left me thinking about the different ways I've experienced that comment before. I'm the kind of person who always second guesses whether I have standing to feel indignant about something, and I've realized that sometimes audiobooks are that thing, especially when I'm moving through the rest of the voiceover world too. I'll put on the record that I've received so much love across the VO world, and some of my favorite spaces aren't audiobook exclusive. And so the kind of experience I want to talk about isn't about everyone, but it's happened. And it seems like sometimes folks from other parts of the voiceover world treat narrators like the poorer, less talented working man cousins. And there's this sense that what we do takes stamina and it takes commitment, but not necessarily talent. And also that, and usually the data will support this, we get paid much less per working hour or per word than other forms of voiceover. We've heard, oh my God, I could never narrate audiobooks. We've heard, you make how much for 2 hours of work? We've heard, I just prefer opportunities for better performances, you know? And voiceover agents and managers often don't want to take full-time narrators on, even when we have fruitful careers. VO conferences don't always include us, and some who do isolate or underserve us. Peers can simultaneously be afraid of and pretentious about our work. So where does that leave audiobooks? Why do we say things like narrator and voice actor? Who will tell my neighbor that I'm happy her son is gaining literacy skills, but reading to him every night is a fundamentally different task than what I do as a full-time job? I knew I had to bring someone who straddles both of these worlds into the Narrator Roundtable today. The vast majority of her income comes from other forms of VO, but she loves narrating audiobooks, wants to put herself forward as someone equally spread across these spaces, but will be asked to talk at a VO conference as an audiobook specialist and might feel like a fraud, but also told by others they were shocked to learn she does commercials, even though it's a majority of her work. So, joining us in all the chaos and confusion and drama of the Narrator Roundtable is Yinka Ladeinde. Hey, girl.
Hello.
Welcome. Yinka is a true audiobook connoisseur, a celebrated voice actress, 4-time One Voice Award nominee, including Female VO of the Year 2024. She loves a good party, but she loves a great outfit more, and you'll find her holding it down in the worlds of commercials, industrials, video games, animation, and of course, audiobooks. So welcome to the show, Yinka.
Thank you.
So I want to just start by bringing in the gals. Everybody here, just tell me a little bit about what, if any, work outside of audiobooks do each of you do?
These days, I do almost exclusively audiobooks. And even before then, in VO, I did some fiction podcasts and things like that. But I can't do as many now that I'm SAG, because just most fiction podcasts are non-union, which is sad because I got into it from theater because I love intimate storytelling. And so I've managed to find enough work in audiobooks to sustain myself. So I've just kind of camped out and stayed there.
Yeah. But I feel that I'm similar. I think less than 5% of my work is non-audiobook related voiceover work, other kinds of acting work. And because the audiobooks I was doing were union and I qualified early and make most of my income there, it's meant that I'm only eligible for SAG work in other spaces. So
yeah,
I'm not doing a ton of
And I've thought about, lots of things sound really fun, right? Like video games, animation, all that sounds so cool, but understandably so. And because they're so siloed, it takes a lot of hustle to break into
Yeah.
those and to know who the players are and to know who to talk to and to get a reel together. Like every little silo of VO requires its own specific hustle. So frankly, Yinka, I don't know how you and other folks like you do it, because I'm like, I don't know if I have enough hustle for like 3 different silos. I can just, I only have the hustle for one right now.
I'm very much the same in that, like, almost exclusively audiobook related work, especially if you count related work. I mean, I have a podcast that has a Patreon that does some income, but it's tied to my work in queer spec fic. And like, I'll do other gigs around town, like I direct a show every now and again. But as far as like how I'm making my living, it's audiobooks. And part of that too for me is I feel like geography, in that like I am in the Midwest. I am not even in Chicago.
Yeah.
Like, and so many VO gigs, the kind I would want are the ones where you go into studio.
Yeah, so nice work if you can get it. Goal is to work full time, to always be an actor and pay the bills, right? So stage, on camera work, commercial, animation. There are few and far between fictionalized podcasts, but I audition for them when they come up. Yeah, so things to supplement, because I'm not 100% self-sufficient on audiobooks. I would love to be, because then everything else could be fringe, but I haven't made it there yet. I'm close. I mean, I qualify for insurance, so that's the most important thing. But, to really have something locked in where I'm like, I know I can rely on audiobooks to pay all of my bills. Like, it's so close, but it's just not quite there yet. Hit.
If you're listening out there,
Right? I'm available.
real talk. I love that. And I'm curious from everybody too. Like we each kind of look at some of these worlds around us. I think Yinka, you're probably the most kind of like equally distributed. Equally isn't the right word, but you have the kind of widest distributions of different types of genres in your portfolio. But I'm curious, like, I think we all have a experience and story about even just being in audiobooks. Do we feel enough? Do we feel like we've earned or deserve to be in different spaces? But with each of your kind of things that you've touched on, whether they're part of your portfolio now or in the past, like, have you felt this kind of search for respect or lack of respect in other spaces when you tell someone, I do audiobooks, or vice versa?
I mean, I definitely don't feel, like a narrator. I always, and Andre's heard this from me before, like, no, then the real narrators are going to be looking at me with side eye now. Like, the real narrators. I definitely constantly feel like I'm the, just because I do audiobooks and the people in the, I hate that I call it VO versus narrator, because narrators are voice actors, but it's hard to distinct for the purposes of this. Let's call it VO and narrators. So like, because I'm in VO spaces, and they know that I do audiobook narrator. Anytime that anything audiobook comes up, they're like, "Oh, this is the audiobook narrator extraordinaire," and I'm like, guys, please, calm down. I love audiobooks, but like, I can introduce you to like some real narrators, But yeah, I definitely, I love audiobooks. I love narrating. I want to get better, all the things, but I definitely, and I don't know what it would take for me to feel like a legit narrator. Maybe more books. I don't know, but there's a whole other thing that opens up with that too. So I already don't sleep. Oh, that's the answer to your question, Lindsey. I don't sleep.
Yeah, I guess I don't find myself in a lot of spaces where I obviously hang out with you guys when I can, when there's a conference or when there's an opportunity. But because my work is so narration focused, that tends to be what we chat about. And so, yeah, I guess I certainly don't feel like I've been in spaces where somebody has judged my work, but I will say the impression I got coming into the industry was that maybe narration was more of a layman's job. It's not the upper echelon. Like if we were to put tiers into voiceover work, narration hangs out pretty low, maybe just above the free voiceover gigs you can get on Fiverr for experience, but not much. Like that's where we hang out. And even when people who do the work describe it, they talk about the advantage of audiobooks being that it's consistent, low paying work, but at least it's consistent, and you can be working all the time, which like not a super great sell for entering this industry. We might want to work on how we talk about it.
Where's the PR team, actually?
Yeah.
But it's funny, coming up in Chicago theater, which is where, I worked for like 10 years before I even got into audio stuff. I feel like, and it's probably just from my time here, I don't know, there's a certain amount of pride in like, yeah, I'm a workhorse. Yeah, I'm a layperson. Yeah, I'm a skilled technician. Yeah, because, like, listen, you talk to any Chicago actor, there's going to be a little too large chip on her shoulder. Because, you tell somebody you're a professional theater actor, they're like, oh, New York, Broadway? Are you in movies? And it's like, no, I'm in a converted storefront, but I'm doing like the coolest, weirdest, most like groundbreaking theater you've ever fucking seen, and you'd be lucky to see it, and I'm getting paid nothing, and I'm commuting on the L at 2 a.m. and I love it. And I'm, I don't know, there's like this sort of like salt in the earth Chicago chip that I carry with me. So it's like, sometimes when I hear things like that, I'm like, yeah, you know what? I'm not the fancy commercial actor doing a Toyota commercial. Like, oh, you're selling your fancy cars. I'm telling stories. I'm sweating in the booth every day. Like, what, I am, you couldn't do you couldn't last a day in here. Like you say 3 words, I say 3,000, I always say more than 3,000. I say 300,000, like, come on. So that's what that brings up in me.
It's like, it's so...
My experience, I would say, is very similar to Lindsey's, because I came up in New York in the snow, on the concrete, at 4 a.m. in order to be in an open call. So no one will hurt your feelings like a New York director. I don't care what anybody else says. And the thing is you're only as good as your next gig. So I have done that commercial that literally bought me a car, and then I did like a 23-minute, picture book. It's all the same. It's all relative. And I've also worked in casting, and I've also been a producer, and I also wrote something, you know what I mean? And it's all of these things. It's all of these levels. It's like where you are at the moment. So for me, I have that New York attitude where I'm like, Google me.
Okay.
Google me, girl. Okay.
Just put in my name. You don't have to put anything else. Just Google me.
This is actually really interesting. And I think it's restructuring where this conversation is in my head. Because it also feels like we in the audiobook space recreate something similar between publisher work and indie work too. And it feels like actually we can find camaraderie with the Fiverr VO person, with the kind of like community theater actor, etc. And I'm curious if it seems like actually what some of what's being sensed is kind of about like the quote unquote, this perceived fabricated created like tier of work. Because I also feel, and this is internal, right? I'm seeing if this internal thing fits into the world outside of me, but I also feel like, oh, I don't have the New York Times best-selling book. That puts me below so-and-so. Or like in the VO space, like I think there's a huge chasm between the Fiverr, the like Upwork, even the Voice 123 folks, and then like the folks with like 12, regional agents who are doing, $1 million on the Toyota, like the Wisconsin Toyota ads every year or whatever it is. I don't know. I'm curious.
I mean, I think it can be internalized, right? Because an author enjoying what I did, those words to me have more power than someone I've never met that might be, a thumb thug, like just trying to rip it to shreds, like for whatever reason. You know what I mean?
I love that
It,
thumb thug.
it, come on. And I think it's like you say, it's relative to kind of where we are as individuals, where we feel that we sit. Now, where I kind of sit in kind of knowing who I am, y'all, this is more than 30 years. More than 30 years working as a professional actor. I was not like this in my teens and my 20s. I cared what people thought. And I morphed and I changed myself to try to be what they are. And it literally wasn't until the 90s when I shaved my head, stopped, putting chemicals in it, and was like, I need people to meet me where I'm at. Because this is where I am today. This is as good as it's going to get in this moment. And my job needs to be to find the people who get it. So for me, that's kind of how I fit everything. And it's automatic. I enjoy knowing who gets me almost as much as I enjoy knowing who doesn't get me. Because it saves time. It saves your heart. It saves your soul, But again, coming out of yourself, having someone come to you with their perception of who you are in the box that you fit in and the level that you're at, that might have more to do with them and them needing to rank their value by putting you below so they can be above, as opposed to where you truly are and the skills that you possess and the work that you actually put out. I mean, I think it's a combination of that, right? Like not just us, but also what's outside of us. Just my opinion.
Yeah.
I very much relate to you talking about the boxes that you try to put yourself in, because that was, I mean, I stumbled into this work through luck and privilege, because I grew up loving being on stage as a kid, but never ever thought I would be an actor because I didn't have a certain look. I didn't come from a certain place. Like that was not my trajectory. I was the second most talented guy in Sheboygan, Wisconsin. That person does not have a career as an actor. And how wrong I was. And through sheer luck did I end up doing this fantastic work. But I mean, we're talking about the difference between calling yourself like a voiceover actor and an audiobook narrator. I still struggle sometimes to call myself an actor, because of all of that bullshit that I'm still unpacking. My suitcase of bullshit is maybe half unpacked, and I've got probably a decade to go before it's totally totally unpacked. And it is a daily practice to remind myself that you can do this work. People like what you do. You have an audience. People are hiring you. And it does not matter if it is the indie author you've worked with 10 times or if it is a new publisher reaching out to you for the first time. Both of those opportunities are fantastic and validating for you.
I kind of feel like, I'm the opposite of Deanna in the way of like I feel brand spanking new. I started this in like mid 2021, just kind of like moseyed my way into the business, and then it just like my career took off super quick, and so I found myself in spaces where I'm like competing with people that are seasoned. And here I am. I was literally just, asking their advice yesterday. And then now I'm competing with them or, possibly booking something over there. Like, and that to me, I'm still just kind of like, okay, but like, I still don't, certain things. I don't know what I don't know until I find out. And so still making mistakes and figuring it out and people asking me questions, and I'm, it's been a journey. It's an ongoing journey. And then for me, a lot of my close VO friends are narrators that have, that probably started at VO in general at the same time as me. But whereas I started off doing a bunch of commercials and corporate and all of that stuff, and then just kind of like incorporated a little bit of audiobooks at the same time, they were out there just chugging away books after books after books after books. And so I'm looking at them, and like other VO people are asking me questions. I'm like, I mean, he got 150 books. Like he probably would know better than me. I just read books because I like it. So that's like and yeah, comparison is a horrible thing, but that's a thing for me. I hang out with a bunch of really talented, great, sought after narrators. And so I'm over here like, I do books. I like it. But I also do this over here. So yeah, that's a thing.
How do you feel, Yinka, when you're in the more like VO specific spaces? Like, do you feel that same sort of thing of like, because you've sort of split into all these different factions, like when you're talking to the more commercial people or animation people, or do you also feel like, oh my God, I'm so new, even though I've been doing this, or do you feel more on more stable ground there?
On the genres that I've done the most, I feel a lot more comfortable. Like, oh no, I'm here. Wait a minute, ask about me. Like, I feel like the genres that I've done the most, I feel very comfortable. The genres that I'm not as comfortable with, I'm kind of just like, okay, I'm here and I feel like I could do this, but like, let's talk about it. So yeah, I do feel that way in other, but because audiobooks feels like a whole nother world, like even in the way that audiobook narrators market themselves online, it's different. It's a whole, like when I was coming in, the information that I was like getting from like VO people, and they're like, oh no, we don't do that. But I'm looking over here like, but I know audiobook narrators and they seem to be putting out every book that come out. What's going on here? What's the difference? What's, just kind of like navigating how am I supposed to do both? Because I don't visibly see a lot of people that are actively chasing after both. It's like, yeah, I mean, if I have to do an audiobook to sort of make up the time, yeah. Or audiobook narrators that are like, I don't really have time to like do that other stuff. I would like to, but I don't have time. Well, yeah, of course you don't, because you're in the booth all day. Yeah. So it's hard to find like a path, someone in, to watch, because I don't see that a lot. People who are like firmly, I see people who are on stage or on camera and doing audiobooks. Like I see that, but people who are like, we're just VO, mainly VO, doing all the different genres. I don't see a lot of that. So I just feel like I'm blazing my own path. And then even when you start talking to like representation and stuff, sometimes they try to discourage you from doing books because it doesn't make that much money. And I'm like, yeah, no, I get it. You're right. No, you're not wrong. But I wouldn't miss it if it was gone. So there's that.
Yeah. I will never forget, I was freelancing with an agency while I still had my day job, but had been doing a lot of audiobooks. And I was trying to impress them and be like, we could really make a thing of this. Like, maybe you'll sign me one day. And I was like, I made like X amount in audiobooks last year. And it's like a good salary in America, like X amount while I was working my full-time job before audiobooks. And they responded and they're like, I'm glad you're keeping busy. Oh, girl. But it's interesting because it is, you said siloed, Yinka, and I do feel like the significance of that is actually really important, because for anyone who is like just focusing in audiobooks, let's say, like the work is the being known and the getting to know, the connecting with all the production companies and getting to know the producers and making sure you come up when the right project is in front of them, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that takes time. And maybe for some people it takes to events and like coaching or whatever it is. It's this whole body of like community work that feels actually like a disservice to the term community work, but like, this kind of like community navigating that you do through the audiobook industry. And then it feels like there are clusters of that in other forms of voiceover. So like the people who are casting and producing commercials kind of have a space. There are the coaches, there are the agents, etc. The video game and animation kind of like cluster, the, overlap in terms of the fans between those two. And so it seems like, yeah, like it is hard to have your feet fully in all those spaces all the time, to be networking with and connecting with people in all those spaces all the time, to be known as someone who can do X when X is kind of specific, not terribly specific, but like, the work of an audiobook narrator and maybe the broad range of styles of an audiobook narrator may not be necessarily what the average video game casting director is looking for, may not be what the average commercial casting director is looking for. So it sounds impossible to just like advertise yourself as someone capable of all those things simultaneously. And it feels almost like an equivalent of like being open to all genres and like, oh, I can do it all, without any specifics. Go ahead.
But then also you have to be careful. Like, okay, sometimes I'm thinking, okay, am I posting too much of this genre? Do I need to like shake things up a little bit and post a little bit of that? Like I was posting a lot of audiobook related stuff for a while. And then someone was like, oh, I didn't know you do commercials? And I was like, oh, come on. Okay, fine. So I was like, let me post one of my commercials. Like, guys, you're not getting the point. Just not wanting to be pigeonholed into one thing or the other, because I absolutely love both. Because like another thing too is that like I hear audiobook narrators say like, yeah, like no, commercials are great, but then it doesn't really like require a lot of acting. Like audiobooks, you get to act. And I'm like, okay, guys, getting a script, whether it's a good script or a bad script, and then saying it as if, oh, like, I'm just saying it like normally, like I'm the one who wrote it, or I'm the one who's just saying it out of my noggin. But I'm saying like presenting, but I'm supposed to sound natural. You think that doesn't take acting? And also, when people ask me like, yeah, but what do you enjoy the most? Like when like seeing, and I'm like, the feeling I get when I see a title that like worked out really well and was beautiful and now it's on Audible. And then the feeling I get when I watch a really well produced commercial that comes out, it's competing feelings. It's different, but it's very similar. Just proud, beautiful, yay, warm fuzzies. So yeah, you guys can't make me choose.
I'm so surprised to hear that people have that take, because I feel like all actors know that it takes a lot of work to sound effortless. It takes a lot of work to sound natural.
Yeah. I mean, I would argue that audiobooks take far more stamina. Like I could make that argument of like commercial VO doesn't take quite as much stamina, but it's absolutely takes a lot of acting. I took a commercial VO class for the first time a couple years ago because I was like, well, I have this whole booth set up. I might as well see. And it was I struggled so much because I was so used to like theater and audiobooks. I was like, my natural read really was like natural. And then it was like, as I started to understand what they were looking for, I was like, oh, natural, but also like if I was a maniac, because like I am comparing my best friend to a chicken sandwich. And so like natural for the kind of person who would sincerely do that, but it's a hard balance to hit because you don't want to sound, like you do want to sound the commercial version of natural, which is really, really hard to do with that text a lot of the time. So you're absolutely right. It's a skill. It's a really difficult skill.
I want to like take it to the ground because Yinka and I both have been to a variety of kind of like broad voiceover conferences. So many giddy smiles from me saying take it to the ground. Broad voiceover conferences that have included audiobooks, have included other things. And I feel like talking about all of this right now, I do feel like it feels like there is a little bit of everything that we're discussing in terms of what creates some of these divides. I think some of it is a little bit of just like not knowing. Like I think about my first audiobook experience, and it was my first voiceover experience also. And I can't imagine having like a familiarity with short form voiceover, coming into your first audiobook, probably something off of ACX, having the worst time in the world, and then turning around and looking at someone and being like, "You do that all day?" Oh, horrifying. Like, I think I get that. And I'm also trying to dig in a little bit to, like, it's not everybody. It is a minority. But I think it's part of what you were discussing, Lindsey, about just like how we have different skills, and those skills take different types of talent, but people get so accustomed to seeing talent only in the lens of the technique that they are most used to. I feel like this was best illustrated to me recently when, like, Olympic gymnast men and Olympic gymnast women got together and tried to do each other's events, and they just couldn't, because they, even though they're incredibly athletic people overall, they don't train in the very specific skills that are involved, like, that are kind of, that each other's, lane focuses in. But I'm just curious about, like, yeah, like, Yinka, do you have other experiences being in person, like really kind of seeing what that looks like as you try to navigate that in person, those differences?
I mean, yeah, it's definitely a different muscles being used. Like even within the VO world, there's definitely like doing a commercial versus doing like a promo. Just so different. So different. And just being able to know the difference and apply the difference. And I feel like certain things can overlap, and you can use certain uh like if you're strong in one genre and you can bring whatever that certain things from some genres can mix in really well with others. Example of that. Like for example, I feel like the conversational tone, the conversational style that I learned in commercials, I use that with audiobooks. And I like hearing that style when I'm listening to audiobooks. And so I just, that's the style that that's my jam. And I feel like that it translated well in that way. I mean, I was told a few times that I wasn't supposed to do that, but I also, like the sort of old school, like da-da-dun, da-da-dun, dun-dun, da-da-dun. It's great for some people, but it would sound really weird if I tried to do it. I've tried. It was awkward. So
Yeah.
yeah, I feel like it translates. But yeah, it's definitely different. It's definitely different. And I've heard certain people try to switch over in different spaces, and it's a difficult thing. Like even like radio people, and they're just like, I could do that, and it's just like, oh no, that's different. What you do is different.
And
and I recently just tried to do a radio imaging, and that is different. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I didn't. I was just agreeing with you. And I was going to say, I think one of the biggest differences that determines style across different VO forms, apart from like the purpose, right? Because a commercial is selling something versus an audiobook is telling a story versus, whatever, and everything in between. But also, I think duration is a big part of it because, and that was something like when I was dipping my toe into commercial VO and then going like, oh, I don't know if I have a whole new hustle for that, but great. But when I was doing that, it was like, oh, because this is 30 seconds long or whatever, or this is a short, or it's a couple minutes or whatever. And we're trying to grab people's attention. And like, so the energy level and and sort of like the level of performance is so like high energy and intense because like you're trying to grab them by the lapels for those like 30 seconds. And even when it's a more conversational tone, I think there's still that like level of like every word is so important, and like because you only have like 10 words to say, or whatever. Whereas like with an audiobook, I was like, oh, we're going to be hanging out for 10 hours. We're going to spend 10 hours together. And if I spend the whole time like up here, like grabbing you by the front of your shirt and going, listen to me, like you're going to want to murder me by hour 3, if not sooner. So like, I think like, how long are you...
Not just return the audiobook.
Not just... No, you're going to find me.
Murder.
You're going to hunt me down. No, so like, I think that the duration is a huge thing in terms of how you approach, because you're always talking to a listener. You're always talking to like an audience. And like, how long are you going to hang out with them is a big question, I think.
Coming to this place is almost like a full circle to kind of like where we started with giving due respect, or there being a lack of respect, you know, that for the person and like what they do, but like take each one of these genres as their own discipline, and respecting the fact that there are very specific techniques to each, just like without assuming just because you can do one, you automatically can do the other. And I don't know, actually studying and taking classes and coaching and gaining those skills, as yourself is your own performance level and growth of education, but allowing the grace to other people to be able to do that, whether you have or not. You know what I mean? You choose not to do that, but like, why would you downgrade the ability or the station of another individual that, I don't know, has been able to do that? I mean, I don't know. It's making me think of my mom, going like, oh, they're mean to you because they're jealous. You know what I mean? Like a very Mean Girls kind of thing, because you do have kind of like clumps or cliques within the communities. You know what I mean? Because like humans, like that's just what we do. So yeah, I find that kind of interesting how we're kind of coming back, almost folding in on like where we started. What is that grain that builds the distrust or the animosity towards people that do more than one thing? And just because someone does more than one thing doesn't mean that they don't do it well. I mean, there's two sides to that coin. You know what I'm saying? And not everybody is full time in all disciplines. Like, it's so many variables. So is that really what it is? Does it just come down to basic respect for someone's choices, even if they're different than yours?
I think that's part of it, but that's also like, that's like the external factor. And I think so often it just starts inside. Because you said jealousy, I would say insecurity is probably another way of thinking about, like, if I'm insecure about what I'm able to do and I see somebody else being successful in ways that I have not yet been successful, it is human nature to try to find a reason why they are not good at that thing. That they're like, you're not allowed to do two things. I can't do two things, so therefore you can't do two things.
Is it human nature?
I mean, sadly, I think it is. I mean, and there's got to be some sort of psychological reason why we shield ourselves from that kind of like self-criticism. Because instead of criticizing ourselves for not having the humility or the drive to learn a second thing, we are going to be critical of somebody else.
I don't even know if this is a term. Now I want to like look it up, but I'm going to call it like the psychology of comfortability. Because I'm comfortable doing more than one thing, because that's how I came up. I came up in musical theater, and I was not given a choice not to dance, sing, and act at the same time. So to give me one or two things to do at the same time, like I'm like, and what else do you have? Am I tapping? Like what? Am I playing a harmonica? What's going on? But everybody doesn't think that way. However, I will say this, being able to focus on one thing is nirvana. It's amazing, to be able to funnel all that energy like into one place. But again, I think there's a beauty to being able to do that in the moment, like not just meeting yourself, but meeting other people in that moment where they are. But yeah, you're saying insecurity. So if people are really uncomfortable with an idea themselves, that could be the projection that they're putting on others. When, that's interesting.
Yeah.
That's
I also-
really interesting,
in
Kirt.
fairness to others, I won't even say they do that. I sometimes do that.
Yeah.
I also feel like some of it, so when coming into the VO world, I heard a lot of people say, oh, no, you can't do everything. Like, you're not going to be able to do everything. But, like, you can try everything. But then, like, the industry will tell you what you'll actually be good at. You can try everything, but you're not going to be able to do everything. That's cute, babes. Keep breathing, keep dreaming. And so it was like, I don't know if maybe that's what spurred me even more. Like, what do you mean I can't do it all? And I mean, I don't know. I guess I don't know if that is maybe because if you hear that enough, you just kind of go with it. Honestly, I've tried to talk to some of my audiobook friends and tried to get them to like, hey, like try, because truthfully, audiobooks pays not as much as other things. So trying to encourage some audiobook narrators to like, I mean, what about like some e-learning stuff or some corporate stuff? Like you, like that translates, like you could use the same skills for those. And them being afraid to do so. What do you guys think of that? Like, why do like, have you guys ever considered branching out and, slicing out 25% of your income to, or
Yeah.
I mean, you
some
would have
people-
to back up a little bit in order to take the jump, but like,
Some
yeah.
people do sleep.
Let's start there.
Listen, I am in awe, but I am. Some of us need to sleep.
y'all do reach outs. You market too. If you like left
sure.
a little bit of space to put that little bit of energy into a different genre, some people could be making
Right.
Yeah.
Listen, you shot that right through my chest. So I hear, like, I am hearing you, but talk about insecurity. I mean, there is this fear of like failing at something else when I'm already doing something well, and it takes somebody else saying, hey, why don't you take this skill set that you already know, learn a little bit more, put yourself out there, and you never know what might come of it. And the thing that's really smart about that is how often do we as narrators, especially over the last couple of years, talk about like needing to diversify our income. Like I found myself at the beginning of this year in a really strange place where it was like for 7.5 years, I had work aplenty. And then there were 2 months of nothing on the calendar. And I went, oh crap, I forgot to have any other way to make money. And I thought being a full-time audiobook narrator was like the goal. It was the peak. And once I achieved that, that was all I had to worry about. And then I was reminded that like, oh, actually, like being able to diversify that income, having something else you can apply for would be a strength, not a weakness. And like, that's what I'm thinking about now when Yinka, you're saying like, have you thought about trying to go into one of these other areas for which you already have a lot of training, and also like Lindsey said, the booth and the microphone. Like I spent a lot of money on that.
Listen.
Stuff. Like I should be using it in all the ways I can.
I want to throw the idea out really quickly, just because we flew by it too. But like part of what our pay all across voiceover is built on isn't just like, what does it take for you to sit down here, or like how do you take your training and translate it into X dollar value? Part of it is based off of like the projected spend or commercial value of the thing we're creating, and that's why commercial voiceover pays so much. It's not because commercial voice actors are like superbly extremely more talented than every other form. It's because it's expected that if you're going to put a commercial up for the Super Bowl, you're going to spend a few $1 million, and I want my cut of that few $1 million. And so I think like with audiobooks in that way being kind of newer among, at least like as a real established industry and kind of large space among like animation, commercials, video games, etc., we don't have those same numbers. We don't have that same spend, even though we're now 12 years into, double-digit growth every year, as whoever reports. But
but even with that, a small number of really successful books pays for the rest of us.
All the rest of it. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And I think like what's been interesting is one of the first ways I came into like just knowing that there were communities of VO people of any kind were through like the Voices of Global Majority list and like those kinds of spaces where actually a lot of those folks were other kinds of voice actors. And over time, I've seen those folks occasionally dip into or come and do more audiobook work. I haven't seen as much the other way around. And I wonder if there are implications there in terms of, one, we talked about kind of like this fear of something beyond you, something unknown, failing in something new. But two, I also feel like those silos and the new gates, the new forms of like entering. Like if you asked a career audiobook narrator today, like, where would you find a commercial job right now? Right? Like, what is that knowledge? What are those answers? And vice versa. Like if you asked a commercial voice actor, like, where would you find an audiobook job right now? Right? Like, I'm sure their first instinct would not be email a producer, because in other forms of voiceover, you do not do that. And I wonder if that's like, not in the same way, right? We often get, Yinka gave us a little head bubble at that. We often get emails for an audition, and the email will say like, so-and-so is casting this. Do not reach out to them. It's just for your knowledge, because every casting director has like different things they like. But like, you get to agents. You have someone who has a successful voiceover career. If a lot of their work is coming from agents, it's unlikely that those agents are bringing them a lot of audiobook work, right? And similarly, like an audiobook narrator might be great at doing all these other forms, and an agent might not be interested in like signing or freelancing with them if they haven't demonstrated any of that other stuff. And I'm just really curious what like the implication is about reframing, because it does feel like even video games and animation somehow slot into the world of commercials more seamlessly than audiobooks do. And I'm not fully able, I think, to like pin down what that gap is, or like what that disconnect is that leaves us feeling a little further out in this world, and leaves folks like you, Yinka, feeling like you've got like, you're doing your Olympic level split like between these two spaces.
I mean, even on Clubhouse, there was there were the audiobook rooms, there were the VO rooms, these are the cliques. They do not mix. And then like in the, there were certain really big VO conferences where the audiobook stuff was a completely separate thing. And they were downstairs and around the corner. And like, I feel like that, and it's different now, but that's just now starting to open up, trying to integrate, I guess, maybe. But I still feel like people are in their corners. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah. I have a couple of questions that are coming up as we're thinking about this that I'd really be interested in your perspective on, Yinka. One, we often talk in the narrator community that like it's one of the most welcoming places you can enter into, and that like people will definitely give you advice and pay it forward from the advice that they received. Do you feel like the rest of the VO community is similar?
I do. If you find the right community, absolutely.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Love that. And the other one I have, I guess, is just about like supply and demand. Like, is the part of the reason that we don't jump back and forth between these two things is that neither one is saying like, God, we desperately need more people in this space. Or like, are all the people who are vying for the VO jobs like, no, guys, we're good. Like we're already fighting against a lot of people for the same jobs. And like over here in audiobook land, we're kind of saying the same thing. Like we're already all vying for the same work. And what we don't need is more competition crossing the barrier.
You're not wrong. It's a fight either way. and you're fighting with the new people coming through, and you're fighting with the on-camera people coming through, and you're fighting with the like everybody. Like, you know what? You guys must get it too. Like, I've always wanted to do what you do. So how did you get into it? So everybody's getting into everything. And so I feel like it's either way, any genre, I feel like you kind of have to fight your way in.
Mm.
But I don't mind a little fight.
I feel like in 10 years, we're going to learn that there was some PR meeting in 2020 and someone was like 10 companies came together and they were like, how do we get more narrators into the space? And then 10 companies came together and they were like, okay, we got to get everybody on voice 1, 2, 3 right now. How do we do it? How do we say this is in? And someone in that room was like, can you speak English? Do you like to read? Do you want to make $400 an hour? But for real, I think all those pieces are so real because I think the truth is like there was a moment as all of these spaces like really expanded a few years ago very suddenly, and there were gaps to fill. And I think that like there are still kind of like certain avenues that it's not perfectly easy to find the right actor for the right job, especially if you want to be authentic about it. Refer to episode 101 of our podcast if you want to learn more about that word. But I do think that like we've now expanded who the regulars are. There are way more regulars than there ever used to be. None of us were regulars 7 years ago, and in a lot of ways now we all are. And I feel like that is part of those lines, but the lines don't feel new necessarily, you know?
No, I agree with you. I don't think they're new. I mean, the one thing we haven't talked about is that defining line of short form and long form. I think that's part of it. And then also that defining line between entertainment and publishing, which I just get so surprised when I talk to other narrators and the fact that it's, well, narrators who specifically started as actors, that even though we came from entertainment, like we're in this new space, we're in publishing. So a lot of things translate, but you got to learn this business. And I think that is part of it as well. Because you're really talking about two different things. I mean, you can be entertained by publishing, and hopefully you are, and that helps with the growth, especially since it is long form. But as far as when it comes down to the bottom line and people's coins, it's short form that is always going to win out because it's the least amount of effort and expense for the biggest reward. Right. And so that's why everything else except for film narration, right, is kind of clumped into that. Because even with like narration on television, it's like by the episode. You don't always have like the same narrator for like a full season. Or even just the scene,
And Yinka, you can correct me if this is wrong, because again, I only live in my own little box, but my perception too has always been that for a lot of the short form stuff, I've always sort of figured like, well, anybody with solid acting chops who's willing to like learn the technique and tweak a little bit to like each genre can like, and has like a closet and a microphone can do it, like I feel like the bar for entry is lower. It's like, oh, it takes skill. It takes acting skill, but I know so many skilled actors who like have agents that send them commercial auditions and, stuff like that. But so many of those people do not have the stamina or the interest or all the things that require, that are required of an audiobook narrator. So that's sort of been my like, I feel like I'm competing because even when I auditioned for something on Ahab, I feel like I'm probably competing with like a few hundred people at the most. Whereas like I think about like a big VO audition and I'm like thousands of people could do that job. Like, and then it just depends on what they want and what little voice quality, but like they could get 1,000 like really really solid auditions. And I'm like, I don't know if I want to be swimming in like that giant ocean every day when I'm auditioning for stuff,
But I also feel like within VO there are certain spaces or certain auditions that you're not you're not competing with 1,000 people. You may only be competing with 100 people or 50 people, just depending on where you found that audition, what representation. Because there's a lot of times where, the client will use a certain casting director or whatever, and that casting director will curate, like, okay, I want this person, this person, this person. And so you're only competing against that smaller group if you just have to get yourself into that space to be considered, into that, be heard. But I feel like it's the same thing. And like, the people trying to get into audiobooks, like I know some VO people, short form people trying to get into audiobooks, and they're just like, you go to a place like like APAC, and like there's 1,000 people trying to talk to one person. It feels the same, overwhelming. How do I even know? And then do I have what is this? What's punch and roll? Wait, what is this? Like, it feels super overwhelming for on the other side too, looking in, like, well, how do I get them to know what I'm not allowed to put out a sample online. Wait, that's not done. Why can't I do that? Like, there's so many, it feels like there could be so many rules and navigating things. So I feel like it's on both sides. They're looking over like, how?
Yeah.
I love this. I feel like everything we're talking about is coming together in my head in a kind of like vision of what this bridge looks like. I feel like, Deanna, you said something super crucial about how like audiobooks are part of the publishing industry. Some of these other forms are part of entertainment industry. Others are part of retail, marketing, right? Like voiceover is actually about kind of being invited into different spaces. And we're doing so much work to learn publishing or whatever it is that we're in, and we shape ourselves around it. I really would love to see kind of a reimagining of voiceover as a skill where maybe in the quote unquote original sense of like what acting really is, like it's actually about your ability to adapt to all these different things. Like I feel like dubbing, people who dub all the time, which by the way, what a ridiculous job, matching mouth flaps, like wild. But people who dub all the time, like being able to learn the stamina for that kind of work from audiobooks, or people in audiobook, like you said, Yinka, like bringing that like, oh my God, it's so simple, conversational commercial style to your audiobook reads, or taking your like your character tool belt, your ability to do like 60 characters in one book into animations, into video games. Like, I feel like there's a way to reimagine voiceover that weaves all of this together seamlessly. And it's both about your acting toolkit and all the different ways that we're able to define like short form versus long form, like Deanna said, define like these different styles, define the specific techniques that you need. And then similarly, like have your variety of business tools, your understanding of like how to witness an industry and identify the key stakeholders and identify the gatekeepers and connect with them. Like it does feel like ultimately the details are different, but like there are all these themes that overlap that can make this seamless, that can make this just be voiceover.
On that, and even on that note, I remember hearing when I first came in that like, if you want to do both, don't tell people that you want to do both, because if you tell an audiobook producer that you do VO, they're just going to think that you're just like a commercial, you're just like a VO person that wants to dabble in books, and they won't take you seriously. And conversely, don't tell your agents that you want to do books, because then they're going to be like, or if you're trying to get an agent, don't tell them that you do books, because they're going to think that you don't have the time to put in to do all the auditions that they send you, because you'll be in a session doing books for hours on end. Do you guys think that that's still true? Or do you feel like it's changed since like, because that was like 2021 around that I was hearing that. I feel like I don't know that that's fully true anymore, because I feel like I see people being pulled from on camera and on stage all the time with books.
I think it just depends, right? Because You're also talking about an industry, as far as celebrities are concerned, that's at a completely different place because of streaming. Like, stuff is not filming the way that it used to. Broadway is not necessarily doing the same types of shows and as many shows as it was before. I mean, first it was, film and television stars going on stage, right? Because of the lack of work. And now it's literally everybody not just narrating books, but authoring or co-authoring books or series and then narrating them or having them narrated. So the whole landscape is like a little bit different because your layperson actor, like that person that literally could have been a regular supporting cast member, and that was like their real job, and they raised their family and put their kids through college on that one series role, that doesn't exist anymore under this new thing. And then on the other side of that, you still have people who are so old school that they want you to get in your car and pay for parking meters to audition in person just because they still own that building or whatever, or they're still paying rent on that space, as opposed to letting you self-tape when that used to be the only way for almost a year and a half to 2 years that you could do anything. So they've reverted back. And that's not to say one way is better or whatever than the other, but I find that the mindset of putting limits on people, of needing to categorize people so you feel you can, deal with what they're doing, no matter how much someone might have grown from 2019 to 2023. Because they had nothing but time to grow,
Yeah.
and gain new skills and go into new places and new avenues. So it's really, really interesting because it's not just LA, it's not just New York, it's happening in the smaller markets as well. And then when you have people who have regional agents, how are those things actually being handled? Like, how are they being cast? And what is the client really looking for? I mean, you still have the clients who have no idea what they want until they hear it or see it. But then you have the people who know exactly what they want, and they will take no less, like, no matter how they find it, whether it's authentic or not.
Uh-huh.
Listen.
Everybody got those.
This
But that's real. And I just want to start kind of like winding us down and synthesizing us down too.
Yeah.
But like I do think, like, Deanna, what you hit on about time to change is relevant, because I think, like, Yinka, if you aren't loud about the things you love, people don't get used to it. And I think maybe that's also a service we can put out into the world, is saying, I'm a voice actor who loves XYZ. And if audiobooks is in there, mwah, beautiful, amazing. Like, I think being able to have for me, I'm navigating a freelancing relationship with an agency. And I found a way to bring books to and through them to be like, look, we can make money together. If you really want to get serious about it, we can make money together and navigate that. And I think that the more that folks explore the reality of that, the more they're going to see the possibility of it, right? Like, who's to say we don't have audiobook agents in 10 years? Not that I would necessarily love it, but I mean, like, people who actually do work in this space, who connect us, who bring us to whatever it is. But things are going to change. And I think ultimately, like, we have to be willing to break the path, because none of us have had the same voiceover path anyways. Nobody's going to have the same voiceover path. And we have to be open about it. We have to be open about finding the things we love, like finding the joy in all things. And maybe that is exactly what we are all supposed to do, right? Behind these mics, is just find the joy in all things and pay rent.
Listen.
And pay our rent.
Mm-hmm.
That much.
Can
I love that.
not to bring the drama, But I do want to push back a little bit on that, because actually the thing that I thought about when Yinka asked the question about like, has this changed about VO work specifically? I didn't think about VO work. I was just thinking about like any person who wants to have more than one job. If you want to have a day job in an office and bartend on the weekends and at night, you don't owe either job an explanation about what you're doing with the time that they're not paying you. And it might be in your best interest that they don't know about each other, because either one could assume that that second job is going to mean you're going to be too tired to show up and work for them. So I don't like, there's a part of just like that. Yeah, if there are two different spaces and there's some sort of bias against the other one, well, then it's none of your business what I do with the time that that you're not paying me to show up for you.
That's real.
That's real.
That's real as hell. I really want to see, I think, like, I do really want to see people really thriving in each of these spaces, like having more conversations about how much they overlap. I do feel like it's a matter of time. I feel like I see some of the folks like doing extremely well in other forms of voiceover, like get called in and like post their little audiobook occasionally on Instagram. And vice versa, like audiobook narrators somehow finding their way to, you know, video games, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I feel like we do just need to have kind of more conversations across those spaces, because I won't lie, I've been to, I want to say 4 different voiceover conferences where I show up and I'm the only audiobook narrator present. Or me and Yinka, like just us two. And similarly, like being at APAC, being at those types of conferences, sometimes I'm the only person who does stuff that's not audiobook stuff. But I'm just gonna be really freaking curious to see, like, the more we integrate, what's going to come of it? How is it going to inform like style change over time? Like, how is it going to expand, you know, oh my God, when will we all accept that actually like the writing does set you up for a really strong performance sometimes, and commercials just need to be written better sometimes? Like, you know, when are we going to acknowledge it? But I think we can bring it all together for the night. Thank you, Yinka, for joining us tonight on the Narrator Roundtable. And thank you, listener, for joining us at the Narrator Roundtable. If you want to join the conversation, find us on social media or visit our website, narratorroundtable.com, to submit a question or topic of discussion for a future episode. What's on your mind? We want to talk about it.
The Narrator Roundtable is produced and hosted by André Santana, Deanna Anthony, Gail Shalan, Kirt Graves, and Lindsey Dorcus. All copyrighted material is shared with permission. Music and sound effects are licensed through Storyblocks Audio. All opinions shared are those of the individuals and do not reflect the positions or policies of any company or organization with which they happen to be associated.